Hey gamers, Aksu here. Do you need a break from Dune? No way you're setting reminders and logging in to maintain base power? This video is for you. In this video, I'll outline actions you can take when life happens and you need to mothball your progression on Arrakis for a while. Spoiler alert guys, I'll show you how to maintain your tier 6 progression, your harvester, carrier, assault, scout, buggy, sandbike, maintain all tier 6 harvesting, refining, and crafting capabilities, and yes, this means efficient large ore and large spice refineries. You'll also get restarted with death stills for water. You won't be able to save large scale operations or the wealth of materials you've amassed, though you can return with your progression intact and equipped to make a speedy return for expansions and new challenges. No taxes, no timers, no logging in to power your shields. Okay, let's get started. If you're like me, you've hoarded a lot of stuff and we feel like it's all precious. There's a lot of unique stuff, hard to get stuff, and just more stuff. This represents the blood and tears of many Dune men at your hands. You drank your own sweat and more for this stuff. If you've got large stockpiles, truth bomb, you can't keep it all. To save your stuff, it's all about long-term storage. To maximize storage, when you finally log off and put your character in stasis, you should plan to log out at one of the settlements, either Arrakis or Harko Village. Why? Automatic storage of your ornithopter that you flew in on, and that vehicle should absolutely be an assault ornithopter with a fully loaded storage module. By logging out in a settlement, we have the following long-term storage to work with. 1. Your backpack. 2. The settlement bank. 3. Storage unit on your assault ornithopter. And 4. Of course, you've already pocketed your scout ornithopter using your vehicle backup tool. For now, that's it. We don't yet have the carrier cargo container. Now we can immediately see a challenge. Your backpack has many inventory slots, but can't hold much weight. On the other hand, the assault ornithopter can hold a lot of weight, but is limited in the storage slots. The settlement bank is also limited and seems kind of meager. My focus will be maintaining progression, harvesting capability, crafting capability, combat capability, as well as self-sufficiency and near immediate readiness to take action. This strategy means that I'm not working with in-game workarounds, such as a base or storage vehicles that are located in areas that currently don't suffer from sandstorm damage. These are a gamble, as any future patch could address these and end up wiping out your storage while you're away. I'm also not saving valuable items to sell on the market and then rebuy everything. That would require startup time, and is dependent on future market conditions as well as the player base. Also, if you try to store extra things by listing them on the exchange, they will time out and they'll be lost if not claimed. The exchange is not a storage strategy. Players who have thrived in the deep desert will have built the most and hoarded the most. This is going to be the most challenging case to put into storage, so this will be my primary focus. I'll show my process, so if you're in a different stage of progression, you can use the same process and should have an easier time storing even more. Here's my approach. I first review the main item categories that our storage plan should consider. Which items are most necessary for maintaining our progression? After developing a plan, the next step will be to see if it all fits within the long-term storage space currently available to us. Here are the character equipment categories. At tier 6, many of these items represent significant investments in materials and spice melange. Harvesting and combat capabilities are directly linked to these. Of course, at any tier, you'll need most of this equipment to maintain your level of progression. Next we have our vehicle and base equipment categories. To get up and running quickly, we're going to need to consider a plan for each category. Once again, endgame players have fortunes in spice and other materials invested into their vehicles and equipment, and all players will be interested in storing their most useful vehicles. In this example, the player has built the medium chemical refinery, which requires a small amount of spice melange. This equipment allows them to begin refining tier 6 materials. Many players will find themselves at this status while working to upgrade to the medium spice refinery. In my opinion, utilities are the easiest to plan for. Fuel-powered generators are essentially free. All of the generator materials can easily be farmed when returning to the game. All of the advanced power sources are really a luxury, but not worth allocating precious long-term storage for. For storage, I would opt for normal storage containers and medium water cisterns. Overall, the materials weigh less and take fewer inventory slots. You will also need a repair station sooner than you'd like. Pentashield surfaces are a convenience, however, they're a good trade-off as they reduce building material weight for walls and rooftops that they replace. I'm going to budget for 10 storage containers, 4 medium water cisterns, and 2 pentashields, one on the rooftop for your ornithopter and one on the side for a buggy entrance. The fabricators are one of my favorite categories when planning to restart later. The basic fabricator is generally obsolete, but it can be built for free without storing materials. Advanced fabricators are only used for crafting tier 6 items, so even advanced players will want to be able to build the standard fabricators when they return. We can see that fabricators have the same base materials in common, with advanced fabricators each having an extra component. This means that we can reduce our storage needs. We only need to save materials to build any one fabricator at a time. I call this a flexible fabricator. For example, we could craft weapons using a weapons fabricator, then demolish that fabricator and set up a garment fabricator to then craft armor. While you can only have one placed at any given time, you do have access to all of the different fabricator types and maintain full crafting capability at your progression level. For refineries, I'm going to narrow this down to 2 examples. Endgame players will not want to give up the efficiencies of the large refineries. Similar to storage containers and water cisterns, the advanced death still is expensive in both weight and storage slots. For long-term storage, I'm going to budget for only 2 standard Fremen death stills. For the lower tier refining equipment, the materials needed are reasonable for storage. For the tier 6 example, we can see that these materials weigh too much. The good news is, these players have experienced the deep desert, so we can maintain our capability by instead planning to set up our initial refining operations in the deep desert, where construction requires only half the materials. The chemical, ore, and spice refinery materials are all now planned for deep desert implementation. Now that we know the items we need to maintain our progression, next we have to see if we have room to store it all. But first, it's that time, guys. Please help support the channel by subscribing. You can also leave a like or comment, which really does help with the algorithm. And if you happen to be interested in live gameplay, I do stream weekly on Twitch, and I really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much, guys. I've set up a spreadsheet to track the long-term storage slots and weight limits. Now the task is to fill the storage with all of the materials that we've identified. Starting with personal equipment, weight of these equipped items still do count, but at least we can make use of the extra equipment slots. You can see that I have a standby list. These are items that I'll consider if we have room at the end. For armor, be sure to equip chest and legs, not a still suit. The weight is the same, but you save a storage slot. I typically only use the still suit body piece. I'll put the rest on standby, as well as the radiation suit. Here's my plan for weapons. If you have a missile launcher, it was costly to craft. While I've left the heavy weapon on standby, in the case of a las gun, this might need to make the list. Your harvesting tools are absolutely critical to maintaining your progression. I've included a scythe for dew harvesting because when you return, water will need to be closely managed until you're able to recover greater generating capacity. Leader johns are heavy. I'm only planning for 1. That one can be used for drinking and dew harvesting. Gathering materials to craft additional leader johns will be highly desired after returning to the game. In my view, a number of the tools just don't reach high enough priority to justify the storage slot or the stored weight. The next category is absolutely huge: vehicles. These probably have the most sentimental values of all of your possessions. At tier 6, these vehicles have so much invested into them, and most have unique and valuable utility. Next, we allocate space for our base equipment. The materials we identified for refineries, death stills in Haga Basin, and ore, chemical, and spice refining budgeted for deep desert setup. Here I'm adding the storage and utilities. While loading up our storage, we first add to existing stacks until they're maxed, before starting a new stack that would take an additional storage slot. Here are the materials for the flex fabrication. We're also going to need some materials for quickly setting up a temporary base. While we could gather granite upon our return, if our inventories are completely full, we would need to drop items on the ground to make room for gathering. While this is an area that could be optimized, my view is that we have an unprotected assault ornithopter with much of our worldly possessions, and I don't want to drop any of them on the ground while gathering building materials. I'm planning for setting up quickly, putting up a quick base, getting base shields up, protecting our ornithopter, and not struggling with our inventory in the process. Remember, when storage is full, it's hard to move things around. This is why I've allocated some backpack space for plastone. I can also refill plastone from the ornithopter while building. I've also allocated some backpack space for salvaged metal, which seems weird, but I can quickly put down a sub-fief console, gather replacement metal, and then place down a generator for base shields. Because the space is allocated, I won't need to drop any items to make room while collecting for the console or generator. Here I have just a couple storage spots remaining, but they can accommodate heavier materials. I shift the lightweight advanced machinery to my backpack, and I load in more valuable items, such as spice-infused plastanium dust, as well as more spice melange. Compared to the plastanium, I think all of the other spice-infused dusts are easily farmed. We can see that all of the storage slots in the bank and the ornithopter are full. However, I can continue to fill stacks with extra materials. I decide to load up with extra ingots, cobalt paste, and silicone blocks. Remember that these materials are needed for repairs, and each would require both harvesting and refining steps to acquire more. Finally, I review standby items and fill out my backpack. For me, suspensor belts are so important that I've allocated a slot for an extra. In some cases, you may use a leap suspensor or a full suspensor, and it's good to have different options for different use cases. For the plan here, I've added all of the remaining stillsuit pieces because I know a lot of players do wear the full kit. As you can see, I did make an effort to store items that would be needed for setup, either on the ornithopter or your backpack. Items in the settlement bank can be retrieved when convenient, but should not be needed for establishing an initial base. While I plan to store the missile launcher, I'm not allocating any space for missiles themselves. If you don't own a harvester or carrier, I would consider using some of these slots for a set of tier 5 armor and tier 5 weapons. I use tier 5 gear for anything in Haga Basin or the Deep Desert A-Row. This would help prevent durability wear on my tier 6 gear as I'm getting restarted. Personally, the stillsuit accessories, the radiation suit, as well as the entire sandbike would be on my list for replacement, but these slots generally only free up enough weight to replace with other gear items. I would probably make room for the las gun, as well as the tier 5 gear that I talked about before. And finally, the tier 5 storage plan left a lot of extra space. While this doesn't yet include extra materials for repairs or valuable extras, it seems that there's plenty of space and weight available. And for players who don't yet have an assault ornithopter, they probably can make the same plan work with a scout ornithopter and a storage module, and then pocket the sandbike instead. I did chart out what it would look like for your tier 6 refining in Haga Basin. The storage chart was immediately overloaded. I also noticed that the vehicle wings and treads all use the same base materials. Perhaps it would be more efficient to store the common base materials and then craft these later, and by doing this we could free up a number of storage slots. In the end, I found that long-term storage was more weight limited rather than slot limited. Because of the additional raw materials, I was actually able to store less extra stuff with this plan. Here's just a few other notes. All of your Solaris should be deposited in the bank. Write all of your extra blueprints to your crafting book. I recommend that your Decaleader John and your stillsuit body both have full water before you store them. If you want, you could also optimize a bit more by storing the lighter weight granite instead of plastone. Then you could choose to store more ingots instead. Once you have your plan, you're going to want to make trips to fill your settlement bank. Before you pocket your scout ornithopter with the vehicle backup tool, if you find that you have extra resources you can't save, you could craft new wings, engine, and power supply. You want to store your vehicle at the highest durability that you can afford. Be sure you also have 2 accessory modules installed. My choice would be the sensor module and the storage module. The thruster is nice to have, however in my opinion, the storage module is much more necessary when coming back to the game. Also refuel to 100% before you store. Similarly, before your final trip to the settlement to log out, also replace parts on your assault ornithopter. Wings, engine, power supply would be the priority. Also have 2 accessory modules installed. My choice would be storage and thruster, and just before leaving, refuel to 100%. Then replace any partially used vehicle fuel cells in your backpack with full ones. Then you can fly out to the settlement and log out. Be sure to log out with your character in the settlement, not from your vehicle on the world map. While starting up later may feel more humble than when you left, the idea is to be able to return and have the capability to quickly return to glory, as well as break into the new expansions alongside other players. Alright, I hope you found this video to be helpful. Please be sure to check out my other videos. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you next time.